Hi everyone, today I'm going to demonstrate for you the first half of how to work on our landscape painting using value to show depth. This is what we're looking at trying to finish in about 2 videos. So to start out, you're going to rip out a page from your sketchbook and you're going to fold it in half and you're going to cut it or rip it in half as well. So our project is going to be on just a half sheet of paper. So for me, I'm just going to rip my paper like that. And this is the paper that I will be working on for this project. You're also going to want to get your oil pastels out for this. You'll need a pencil for the first part, a paintbrush for actually painting, a cup of water, and then you're going to need some type of palette. I'm using a whiteboard that I just had in the art room, but any type of plate, even a paper plate, as long as it's coated with like a plastic coating, a lid for a Tupperware container, anything that's plastic will work really well for a palette. So starting out, we have our piece of paper now in front of us. We're going to use our pencil and we're going to do a really simple drawing to begin. So starting about halfway down the page, I'm going to create a line that's going to go nice and straight about 3/4 of the way across, and then I'm going to stop about there. I'm going to go all the way to the end now, across from where my line just was, move up about a 1/2 inch, go across, and then I'm going to go down and just meet that original line, and I'm going to stop about halfway and just kind of let it trail and fade out. So now we have our foreground. This is going to be our water, and now we're going to create 2 mountains. So start in the top right corner. I like to do kind of a wavy line just to give that indication that our mountain has some rocks on it. It's not perfectly even, and we're going to stop a little bit before halfway across. Do the same thing on the other side. This side I'm going to start a little bit down, not quite in the corner. Again, not a perfectly smooth curving line, and stop about 2 inches away. So there's a little gap in between. Then on this mountain, I'm going to start down about halfway. Again, some little mountain ridges. It's up to you how you want those to look. Stop maybe in the center. Again, halfway on this side. Make a few marks, lines, and I'm going to actually connect this line to the mountain we just had, and then one final little mountain in the furthest background. So this is the object that we'll be painting in. We have, again, in our foreground is the ground. We have, this is going to be water. We have the 2 mountains closest to us, 2 mountains that are a bit further away, and then our furthest mountain in the background. The first thing we're going to be painting is our sky up here. So to do that, I'm going to get my palette and I'm going to be using blue. We have a couple different shades of blue, so I'm going to be using both of those to mix up my color. If you want to be a little bit fancy and add a little bit of purple to it, you could do that. If you want to add a little bit of like orange or red to make kind of like a pinky purple sky, you could do that for more of a sunset or sunrise view. But I'm going to keep it simple today and just use a couple different shades of blue. So I'm going to color pretty hard on my palette to get some nice pigment down. All these little bits that come up, don't blow those away. We want to use those. That's good, solid pigment for us to use as paint. So I have a layer of my dark blue. I'm going to add in a little layer of, and if you break your oil pastel, you're strong. It's okay. We can still use this. No worries. Add a layer of that light blue as well. I'm going to take my paintbrush. Again, you can choose which one you like. You should have 2 of them in your paintbrush kit. You can see which one you kind of prefer. Take a little bit of water, and I'm just going to add a tiny amount of water and do small circles to hydrate that paint, bring it to life, and it's going to give me a nice, vibrant blue. I'm going to add just a little bit more water to here. So I have a beautiful, vibrant blue. If you ever want to test and see what your color looks like, you still have the other half of your paper. You can take that little scrap of paper you have and just see if you like that color. I like mine. It's a nice, vibrant blue. I'm going to start it across the very top of my page, and I'm going to do a stripe of my vibrant blue. I'm not gonna work down here. I'm just gonna be working across the top, and my paintbrush strokes are gonna go back and forth, horizontal. If you go over your lines a little into the mountain, it's okay. We're not trying to be perfect. If we go outside of our lines a little bit, that's all right. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to get some more of that vibrant blue happening. Sometimes I'll do my edges first, just to make sure that I have that edge nice and crisp. And I'm gonna paint, again, nice and vibrant across this top part. And then as I move down closer to the bottom down here, I'm just gonna be adding water. I'm not gonna be adding more color. We want a value shift in our sky from nice and vibrant up near the top to very watery and light blue down at the bottom. So I'm having, notice how my paint here is almost this pale blue, almost like water. So as I get down by this mountain now, I'm basically painting with what looks like water. Very, 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 very light. I'm not gonna be perfectionistic about this. I'm not gonna worry about going over my lines a little bit. That's okay. The thing I care most about is that I have that shift in blue from bright up here at the top, the brightest blues up here, fading down to a kind of medium blue, and then very, very, very light here at the bottom. So that's it for our sky, easy. The next thing we're gonna be painting is our mountains. So to color those, I'm gonna be using 2 different shades of green and a little bit of brown. If you don't have brown, you can always add a little bit of red as well. The brown is gonna make our green a little bit more dull. It's gonna soften it so it's not quite that grass green. So I'm gonna push down pretty hard again on my palette. Get a nice coating of green. Again, keep all those little bits of oil pastel. Oh, again, if your oil pastel breaks, that just means you're a strong artist. That's all right. Add a little bit of light green, and then I'm gonna add, again, just a little bit of brown just to soften that color, make it a little bit more dull. A little bit of water here. And I'm gonna get a nice, vibrant green. Again, if you wanna test it first and see how it looks on your scrap piece of paper, I think that green is actually a little bit too vibrant for me. I want it to be a little bit softer, a little bit more dull, so I'm gonna take a little bit more brown. Again, if you don't have a brown, you could use red as well. And you'll see that makes that green just a little bit more of a foresty green, not quite so bright grassy green. I'm gonna take that value of that color that's nice and bright, and I'm gonna paint the mountain that is closest to me first. So I'm gonna go right along my edges. I'm not gonna worry about a shift in value for these mountains because this mountain is sort of on one plane. So this isn't like the sky where we're doing a value scale. I'm gonna paint the whole thing this green. Again, I'm not adding any water because I want it to stay that same vibrant green. So I put one side done. If you run out of paint, that's okay. You can always mix a little bit more if you need to. So just color right on top of that with your green or brown oil pastel. Again, this mountain over here is going to be the same shade as the one across from it. we have two mountains now that are nice and bright. Now we're gonna paint the mountains that are further back. So in order to make them look like they're further back in space, we need to make them a lighter green. So I'm just gonna add more water to the palette that I have. And now I have this really light watery green. That's what I'm gonna paint on the mountain next. It's better for this to be a little bit too light than too dark. You definitely should see a shift in value between these two. If you don't, if you paint this mountain the same color as this one, they're going to look like they are on the same plane. It's not gonna, you're not gonna have that illusion of space. So it's better for this part to be a little bit too light, because you can always add another coat and make it a bit darker if needed. And again, we'll be adding detail onto this in the second video. Right now we're just getting a general wash down of color. So again, our brightest green, slightly lighter. Again, I'm gonna add a little bit of water and do the same thing on this mountain. And then the very furthest back mountain, what we want to do is basically paint it with our water. You should almost feel like you're just painting it with no color at all. It's almost going to be the white of the paper. Of course, we don't actually want to leave it fully white, but we want it to feel like it's almost the white of the paper. If you feel like there's not enough contrast between this one and this one, and you can always go back, add a little bit more color if needed to have a little bit more contrast between them. But when you're finished, you should have 3 different layers of mountains that have 3 different values. So brightest, then the next light, then the most light, and then these should be the same, and these should be the same. Already we're starting to get kind of a sense of depth in our work, which is awesome. The next thing we're going to be painting is our water right here. We're going to be using blue again, and I'm going to use the same blue that I had before, but I'm going to be changing it up slightly so it doesn't look quite the same as the sky. So I'm going to add some light blue on there. And I'm going to put quite a bit down because I'm going to need quite a bit of paint for the water because it's a fair amount of space. And then I'm going to use just a little bit of yellow. What that's going to do is make my water a little bit more tropical looking, a little bit more of like that blue-green. So I'm going to mix that up and see how it looks, see if I like it. Add all those colors, pigments, and we want this again, we want it to be nice and vibrant when we start. I'm going to test my color and see how it looks. Notice that this is a little bit more turquoise than my sky. That's what I was hoping for. I'm actually going to add just a little bit of the dark blue in, just to make it even a little bit more vibrant. I think I like this one, even just a little bit more. So there's a slight difference between this and my sky, but it definitely has a little bit of that turquoise feel to it. So for the water, we're going to start with the brightest part down here at the bottom. When we get over into this area where the ground is going to meet the water, we're just going to stop right in here. We're not going to worry about having a solid edge. So I'll show you what that's going to look like. And I'm going to take my color. I'm going to do those horizontal brush strokes. And again, the bottom is where I want it to be the most vibrant. And when I get to kind of where the ground is, I'm just going to let my brush just fade a little bit. We'll be blending that with the ground later on. So once I have this vibrant part down, I'm going to add a little bit of water to that turquoise color. And I'm going to do the same thing I did in the sky. I'm going to start actually making that blue fade out. And I'm not going to worry too much about my edge here because I'm going to paint that over. So if I go over my lines a little bit, it's okay. So when I get about halfway up, it should feel kind of like a medium blue. And then as I get closer and closer to the horizon, it's going to get lighter and lighter. Be careful not to use too much water as you do this. This paper isn't equipped to handle a ton of water. It can't absorb a lot of it. So you don't want your paper to start disintegrating or buckling too much on you. So just be mindful of how much water you're using. But you do want that, again, that transition in value, just like you had in the sky, from really bright to kind of a medium blue to that light blue happening in the background. If you can see the paint marks, like paint strokes going back and forth, that is great. It actually gives your water a little bit more texture. As long as you're just moving back and forth, you don't want to paint like this. You want to paint back and forth. So we are getting a great sense of depth already. The last thing we're going to be painting is the ground over here. This is the closest thing to us. So what we're going to do now is make a brown for the ground. I'm actually going to use my green. I'm going to mix it with the brown one more time. And this is where you can kind of have fun making your own shade of brown. You don't have to just use the brown from your kit. You can mix lots of colors together. If you mix all the colors together, you're going to get brown. So you can kind of play with mixing the brown and the red and the blue. Maybe pull that green into it, add a little bit of water, and you can see pretty quickly you're going to get a nice shade of brown. You can even pull some of the blue over from your water if you want to, as long as you're done with that. So I have a nice shade of brown here, nice and vibrant. You don't want this to be too dark. That's the biggest thing. If you make this too dark, later on when we try to add details, if it's too dark, you won't be able to see your details. So make sure that it's not too dark, but otherwise just start over here, and we're going to kind of paint in the direction of the ground. Again, do our outline first. We're painting a pretty big area right now, so if you run out of paint while you're doing this, you can mix up a new brown. You don't have to try to even match your original. If it changes, that's okay, because as we know, the ground is not going to be all one shade of brown, right? There's going to be lots of different tints and shades, and we'll add detail to this tomorrow. But don't worry too much if you run out of your color. As you get down to the water, you're going to paint right into the water just a little bit and mix that brown that you have in with the blue. You can even use just a little bit of water down here at the bottom to kind of blend those together. So it's going to give you that sense of that the water is really coming up to the edge. And like I can see that I'm kind of running out of my color over here. If that happens, no worries. I'm just gonna mix up a new brown really quick. I'm just gonna mix some red, yellow, and blue together. Maybe I'll even put some of the actual brown in there. Now this brown I'm making is a little bit more reddish. Pull some of the turquoise over again from the water. It's not quite the same, but that's okay. Again, you want to keep these brush strokes really nice and loose. We'll be putting more detail on top of this tomorrow or in the next video. So as you can see in my painting here, you'll see there's some areas that are a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. I'm not worried about getting this all one flat shade of brown. In fact, I don't want to do that. I want to have some of those highlights and shades and shadows in here to make it look more realistic. There you have it. That is the first layer of paint for this project. We are going to let this dry now before we do anything else. So if you get to this point, just stop, take your paper somewhere where it can dry safely, and then the next video I'll show you how we're going to add some detail on top of this.